I'd like to welcome to the stage first, please, Lee Cooper, the director. Also, please back to the stage, Miss Jason. And we've also got the producer here, Deborah Aston. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you so much for sharing the film with us.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to say briefly how this is going to work, because we want questions from everyone here. I've got plenty, but I'd rather be asking questions from you. So if you would like any questions, comments, through to slido.com. If you can't get 3G, 4G in here, there's Showroom's got free Wi-Fi. You might just need to give your email address, but otherwise it is free to log on. If you pop in the number 321369, your questions will pop up on here and I can relay them for you. But yeah, first of all, again, just thank you for sharing this really beautiful, really tender film with us. I think the thing that came through for me the most, having seen it now a couple of times, is the really beautiful way in which the friendships are portrayed. The friendships with David, and obviously Jason, you're part of that. I just think it's really beautiful. The way that those friendships and that kind of sense of community really comes through in the film. But my first question is, I want to start by asking how the project came about, and I guess, to you first,
Sure.
Lee.
I'm a big fan of drag in all its many forms, and there's plenty of it in Brighton, for sure, where I live. And I was introduced to David, to Maisie, to a friend, and he said, you must meet this really interesting guy. And just like I think many people here today, I just kind of fell in love with him a little bit. And I had no massive plan to tell his story. I sort of started the project as part of a film course at Met Film with a couple of others, with Shireen, who's here today. And it sort of was a little short that sort of didn't get finished. And then it was like a scratch that I didn't quite itch. So a couple of years later, when I was introduced to David, for the second time, I was like, I really need to finish this, really. It's too good a story not to tell.
And then I guess, Jason, from your point of view, how were you first introduced to Lee? And
I think we were probably pissed in Legends. And he said, what are you doing tomorrow? Because you're coming out with Maisie. And it turned out to be such a big journey for all of us, and it was, I don't know how you've done it really, Lee, and I know that you've pulled it together and polished it and everything, but how you had the patience with all of us, because there were so many people, so many drag acts involved in this, and it must have been like herding cats, because drag acts are very difficult people to work with. But I think we just got together, we spoke about it. I mean, like Alan, I've known David for many years, and it's so lovely that now we've got something that everyone can see, and I think that's kind of how you said you fell in love with him. And there's something about David's personality that is magnetic, and you just it's like a light. If you don't want, or a spot that you don't want to look at, you just kind of keep going like that. So that's how it happened. We just got together, had a drink, and that's how I was involved, and then we all ended up being involved, really, didn't we?
Yeah.
We've got a question from the audience already saying, well, first of all, thank you for sharing this gem. Asking, has David seen the film? If so, what does he think of it?
So David has seen the film. We only saw it just 2 nights ago, actually, and I felt it was really important that David saw it before anybody else did. And Alan, who you saw in the film, very kindly offered to host, and it was just myself and Alan and Jason with David, and it was surprising because he got upset at the things we didn't, because, you know, and when I reflected on it, I was like, well, this is his life. Of course he's not that interested. He's just going about being himself. But when he saw some of the old photographs that he'd forgotten kind of existed, I think that that really moved him, and he said a few times, "Oh, what are you children doing to me?" And then finally at the end, Alan and Jason left us alone for a moment, and I said to David, you know, so honestly, you know, what did you think? He said, "Oh, well, it's an SOS film, dear." And I was like, "Oh, SOS, that sounds a bit, you know, dramatic." I said, "Why SOS?" He said, "Same old shit, dear." In his own way.
And I guess just to kind of extend that question to you, Jason, about, you know, I know you only saw the film at the same time a few days ago.
Yeah, we saw it the other night, and I thought
how's it been for you?
Seeing it the other night was really emotional, actually, and I thought I might not get too caught up in it and emotional against it, but it's so powerful. Watching David watching it was really, really interesting the other night, and a couple of times he just lifted his jacket up, didn't he, and he hid behind his coat, you know, but the joy on his face and the recognition of the people he'd worked with, and, you know, to have had a career like that and it all be in your mind and in your memory sometimes, not all the time, and then to see it in something like that is wonderful. I can't begin to imagine how he felt, you know.
Yeah.
Just beautiful to watch him. It was smashing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, how is he doing? Because I understand, you know, he couldn't be here today, which is a real shame, but I also understand that he is still performing.
Oh, God. Over last weekend, he did 3 shows.
Right.
And it's quite amazing. David can be, and he's been like this for a long, I mean, Alan really, really is a great support to David and is the best unpaid carer, I think, in the world. But David can be really bent over and you think, Christ, how's she going to do the show? And the minute he puts one foot on stage, he's absolutely fine. You know, it's amazing. It's almost like a light switch. And the fact that he did 3 shows over the weekend has really brought him back to life, hasn't it, Alan? You know, and it's great to see him like that again.
And I understand this has been, you know, whilst it's been Lee kind of, you know, driving as a kind of driving force for the film, I understand it's been, you know, a real kind of collaboration. And Deborah, I wondered if you could speak to that a bit, because I know that we have some of those collaborators with us in the audience.
Yeah, I mean, there's a theme going on, because obviously over way too many Prosecco's, I found out about Maisie, and Lee was telling me about, you know, this amazing character, and you know, we're all a big fan of the, you know, the drag race, RuPaul's Drag Race, but you know, looking back, there's a whole history behind that I think is really untold, and the stories untold and characters untold, and I'm really interested in people's stories, and Lee had mentioned he'd got a lot of footage and really needed to know what to do with it and where to start, and I think we started to find that voice and find the story and pull everything together. And Lee had already kind of worked with the crew, so I came late to the party, but I kind of you know, worked with Lee to pull things together and to find the story, like I said, really, and you know, and the end result is, I think, something that's really emotional, and you know, I think it was pitched to me as a film about drag, but actually it's really evolved into a hell of a lot more than that, and I think, you know, the proof is in what we've all just watched, and you know, I certainly get a lump in my throat watching it, and I'm sure a lot of other people do.
Yeah, Deborah was really good. I was working with my editor, Gareth Lang, over there. Hello, Gareth. And what she was really good at was making me remove any of the extraneous stuff, because we had so much footage. And Deborah was like, if it's not about David, if they're not talking about David, or if David's not in it, cut it. And it was quite a wrench, because there's some really funny stuff in there and other drag stories and, you know, lots of good content, but it really helped his story shine, and that, you know, Deborah was really good at helping me do that.
Yeah, and like, yeah, Deborah, I really hear you when you're saying that, you know, there's kind of been a real resurgence in drag and RuPaul's Drag Race and so on and so forth that's like really popular at the moment. So it's kind of been amazing to look at kind of where that's come from, because this film, whilst it's very much about David, it's about a whole kind of subculture. It also seems to me to be very much about friendship. It seems to me to be about aging. There are kind of so many broader kind of universal themes like beyond the drag. We've got a question we've got a question from the audience saying the US drag artist and David's meeting seemed a little prickly. How was it really?
So there's two very different styles of drag. So for the Brits, it's very much from the pantomime tradition. It's very much end of the pier, saucy postcard humour. And then, it's the panto dames. So David is our panto dame. But then you've got the American style of drag, which is born from the beauty pageants. And it's much more about the lip sync and about the performance and about the outfits. And I love them both dearly. But David was running rings around Walter. He really, really was. When he knew there was a bit of competition, it really sort of like ignited that sort of light in him. So yeah, it started off really, really well, and then it ended up not so well. Yeah, but I felt like it was like, yeah, one for the Brits.
We've also got a question from the audience wondering if anyone involved with the film had anything to do with the recent British film Tucked. Thought perhaps Darren Nesbitt might have spoken to David.
So it was an absolute coincidence that Tucked was being filmed at the same time as we were filming our documentary with David and the gang. But I now know Jamie, the director, but at the time we completely were unaware that we were both filming this content in the same place. And I've since spoken to Jamie, the director of Tucked, and he thinks that David might have been the act that he saw which actually inspired it. Because Jamie said he got drunk with his missus one night and ended up in a drag bar and basically saw the act and thought, okay, I'm going home with the missus now. Where's he going? What's he doing now? And I think that's what sort of inspired Tucked. So, and I was like, yeah, and I'm doing the True Lives version of it as well.
And I just wanted to ask Lee about how it was that you seem to really build trust with David. There are a couple of really poignant interviews, and moments where, particularly where he speaks about Don. And yeah, I guess I'm wondering, how long were you filming him for? What was your kind of, how did you build that trust so that he opened up to you in that way, kind of way beyond the kind of performance of Maisie?
I think as you see in the film, both David and Walter are at that stage in life now where they're just like, F it, we kind of don't care anymore, we'll let it all hang out. And he was quite keen to talk, I think. But having Jason there definitely helped, and Jason was brilliant at almost being an unofficial interviewee. But both Walter and David actually were kind of almost oversharing to some degree. They quite enjoyed talking about it. Obviously, I was really mindful of where we went and what we spoke about, and I was really careful with David afterwards to say, look, we just filmed this. This is on camera. This is going to be in the film, And he was like, yeah, and he was quite happy. As you saw, they were both happy to let it all hang out, both physically, but also, to share their story. And it's interesting, when we watched it, didn't we, and with David, and we were bawling our eyes out, and David was just like, yeah, it's my life.
We've got another question that I think would be really nice to hear from each of you on, which is, do you have any messages or ideas that you would like audiences to take away from the film?
Ooh. I'm going to let Deborah start.
Oh, do you know what? For me, I think the real message of this is you're never really alone. You know, David's got an amazing, community around him and strong friendships, and you're just never too old to do anything you really want to do.
And that's a brilliant message to go away with.
Oh dear, yeah. I think the message of this film is just to start. We must start being kinder to each other. I think, and certainly within the gay community, lots of members of our community face a lot of prejudice and hurt and upset. And there was a hate crime survey in Brighton. It turned out that the majority of the hate crime came from within our own community. And I think the story here is, we just got to start being nice to each other and looking after each other. And when you build friendships like we have with David, they're completely magical. So there must be someone out there that could do with a phone call or a cup of tea or a glass of Prosecco. And when you see some funny, doddery old man walking down the road, take a little think about them, because they could be someone like David that's done so much for our community, fundraising and helping people with advice and kindness and love. So never judge a book by its cover, I guess.
That's beautiful, thank you.
Well, obviously I can't top that.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, just to reiterate what Jason says. I mean, that's absolutely spot on, Jason. We're too easy to judge, aren't we? Just as people, we're just too easy to judge. So if you're fortunate to have a grandma or a granddad or, an elder who lives local, give them a call, give them a smile.
Thank you. Right, sorry, we've got another couple of questions. So, with production spanning 3 years or so, what in particular was most difficult in making this film into the final product it is now? And I guess the question doesn't, maybe this is kind of implicit in the question, but also, producing this in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah. Fortunately, we'd shot all the footage before the pandemic. And, this is my first film, so in my naivety, I just kept shooting and filming and interviewing for a long. So we had so much footage to go through. So that was really time consuming. But this is literally the first time any of us have seen it on the big screen, because we couldn't even get into a proper edit suite to look at it. So my TV at home is the biggest I've ever seen this thing. So it's been quite a roller coaster today, hasn't it?
Yeah, obviously Zoom's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Just to help to kind of to keep the momentum going, and obviously Lee is probably one of the most impatient people I've ever met.
Thank
so
you. Pride myself.
was desperate to get the film out there. So trying to be supportive to a director from a distance is not always easy. But he was great to work with. He took on the notes and took on feedback and really applied it, and and working with obviously Gareth as well, to all of us had to be remote, and it's not an easy thing when you've got such emotional beats and real characters within the raw footage. There was so much footage that the story could have gone in any direction, and I think the difficulty of finding those gentle, the nuances within all of the footage wasn't really easy. So, kudos to Lee. He sort of took those notes on board, and I think we're really transformed actually when we think back to that first cut, what we've been able to achieve working remotely. And I think in some ways lockdown was a blessing in some ways to give us that time to reflect and think on things, because there would have been sort of, God willing, is around a long time, but with David's age, there's almost an urgency to get the film made and get it out there, and perhaps do it an injustice in doing that. So I think we've got a film that does justice to David and Maisie, and I think that allowed us that time to allow it to breathe a little bit, and I think that was good for the film.
Yeah, you mentioned a word there that I just think captures the film really well, which you said gentle. I think there's a real gentleness and there's a real kind of kindness in this film. And so on the one hand, you've got, you know, like Maisie is quite a radical character, you know, who's done, you know, who's been radical for like so many years and in a way like continues, you know, to be so, and yet there's such a kind of gentleness and a tenderness and a kindness from David to David and within the film that I just think is really touching. Yeah. Okay, have we got time for any more questions? Sorry, I'm going to ask Greg. Was that a... I can't see anything. Sorry? Two more. Okay. So we've got one question from a Joanna in the audience asking, how did you approach filming with David? Did you have a specific idea for what you were looking for each time you went shooting?
I think it evolved, really. I think, to take Deborah's point, the story almost did change. When I got into it, I thought this is his life story. And in my head, I had this idea of telling the story of how the gay community had changed over the years through David's lens, because I knew he'd been there at every juncture. You know, every decade, David was there. He was there when it was, you know, illegal. He was there when the pubs were getting raided. He was there when it became popular. You know, he's there when RuPaul's taking over the, you know, the British style of drag. So I very much went into it with that in mind. And as I spent more and more time with him, I just became fascinated with the beauty of watching an elderly man struggle to get into a pair of sequined heels. That for me was the story, you know, that smelly old Brillo pad that he applies his makeup with, and it's smelly, you know, that for me was the story. The more, you know, and you know, Gareth and I almost had 2 films on the wall, and that other film still exists, the footage still exists. All these interviews, you know, apologies to all the Brighton drag queens who didn't make the film, who, you know, I did interview, and the 2 films were like the history, you know, the life of David, and what felt more powerful and more touching was a day in the life of David. And ultimately all that other stuff, we just cut it and said, let's just follow him. You know, let's just turn up, and who knows what would happen every time we saw him. And what we did know that we were going to use the thread of it being his 85th birthday. So obviously on his 85th, that's when we stopped filming. But yeah, with David, every day was a surprise. Who knew what might happen?
Yeah, and so my last question is, and just to each of you, is, you know, this is your world premiere, and I just want to get thoughts from you on, you know, what's kind of next for the film, or if that's too early to say, is kind of what you hope to be next for the film.
Well, I guess, well, we've been talking about this a lot, and I think the sort of the plans that we had pre-COVID and pre-lockdown are obviously having to be revisited because, you know, as well as the usual distribution and, you know, theatrical and acquisition sort of routes we want to explore, there's also a part of us that also wants to put together some kind of an outreach program and to be able to go to, you know, care homes and hospices and all that sort of thing, because, you know, I just want to, you know, celebrate you're never too old to go and achieve your dreams and keep chasing your dreams and doing what you want to do, no matter how outrageous that might be. And I just think there's a film there that could really, you know, take that powerful message out to a lot of care homes where, let's face it, you know, there's a lot of older people out there who have still got a lot of life in them but are just pushed up a corner and, you know, sort of left and neglected. And I just would love to do something whereby, when we've spoken about this, whereby we can, you know, put on a show and bring some entertainment to people's sort of living room, if you like.
And also there's like almost a new wave of homophobia as that older generation go into care and care homes. They're suddenly put back together again with people who don't share their views and don't share, you know, their outlook on life. And it's like this new form of homophobia almost. So, you know, I see it as it could be an amazing educational piece as well for that generation, which is, you know, quite different to, you know, modern thinking, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah, I mean, it's like quite a scary prospect, isn't it? Of kind of, you know, I can imagine lots of people spent years choosing who their community is around them, and creating safe spaces for themselves through those communities, and then to get to a point in life where you don't any longer have that independence to necessarily define that space and that community, and to, for example, to go into a home where homophobia might be there. That's a very...
Yeah, it kind of blows my mind, but when you stop to think about it, it's kind of obvious.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, kind of obvious, but kind of very is under discussed.
Yeah,
like a
untalked
word,
about.
untalked, but
Yeah.
Because you know, I guess, even for even within the content and the films and the television and so on that we're watching, that's, you know, about, by, for you know, the LGBT community, it's rare that those characters are of an age where this is like even a talking point.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
and
one of the brilliant things about, you know, this film.
Thank you. There's so many amazing coming out stories. You know, I'm many committed to film. I wanted to see what the other end of the tale looked like.
Yeah.
That was important for me.
Yeah.
And we'd love, obviously, Miss Jason to sprinkle off your sparkles and do a show and a screening and do something really celebratory, I guess, in Brighton.
Oh, I'm happy to
In-
sprinkle
in-
anywhere, dear. In fact, I'm
in the very
sprinkling
near
in
future.
Sheffield tonight. I think.
Where can we come see you?
Watch this space.
So I guess just on that last question, Jason, about, you know, what's next for the film, or what you would next hope for it. Is anything to add? Or
Yeah, well, I can't add anything to what you two have said. So, but what I do want to say is I'd want as many people to see this as possible, because it truly is a great thing to have a friend like David, and it's just really lovely to be able to share what a great person he is and what he's been through. So really all I want to say is thank you, and thank you as well. You know, thanks for the work you've done and pulling it together, and David is over the moon, and I know if he could have been here today, he would have been, and we'd have been here an awful lot longer than this.
This is true.
well, thank you so much. So congratulations
Thank you.
on your world premiere. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your questions. Lee, Jason, Deborah, thank you very much.
Thank you
Cheers,
very
thank
much.
you. Thanks.
Just a really quick one from me, sorry, it's just to say that Maisie is up for the Audience Award. For anybody who would like to vote for the films that you've seen, go to chefdocfest.com /vote. And also just to say we've got more cabaret for you later on today. We've got a film called Roses, Film Cabaret, from Ukraine, about the Dak daughters, who are a kind of dissident cabaret act. 7 artists, multilingual, multi-instrumental act performing kind of tragicomic musical theatre. And it's over at Aberdale Picture House at 7:30, also part of the Rhyme and Rhythm Strand. Again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you.